Welcome to Conspiracist. Today we're diving into a really persistent and frankly intriguing hypothesis. The idea that governments, perhaps worldwide, have been actively suppressing evidence about alien implant phenomena.
Right. This core idea is that physical objects, supposedly extraterrestrial, have been found inside people's bodies. And crucially, that discoveries like these have been deliberately kept under wraps, hidden from the public.
Exactly. So our mission today is to explore the information out there about these claims. We want to do this with a strictly objective professional lens. We'll be examining the reasoning, the reported evidence, but without any, preconceived notions or just dismissing it out of hand.
It's a fascinating area. And it's maybe worth starting by saying the idea of alien implants isn't exactly brand new, is it? It actually has roots that go back further than you might think, especially in pop culture.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think about the 1953 film Invaders from Mars. It depicted these little needles inserted into people as alien control mechanisms. So that's way before we started getting documented accounts in, say, ufology. It shows how sometimes these cultural narratives can sort of pave the way for reported experiences later on.
Okay, right. So the concept was kind of seeded in fiction first, but let's unpack its emergence in ufology itself. It seems like the 1980s were a really pivotal time for this, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The whole topic of alien abduction really exploded in the 80s. You had figures like Bud Hopkins, Whitley Strieber, David Jacobs.
And even the psychiatrist John Mack, who we should probably talk more about later.
Yes, him too. They brought a huge amount of attention to abduction phenomena, and alleged implants were often a key part of those narratives.
So while there were earlier abduction reports, the Betty and Barney Hill case is probably the most famous early one. These researchers in the 80s were arguing it was happening on a much, much wider scale.
That's the argument they were making, yes. Now, of course, there's the skeptical side. People who look at these claims and offer more, let's say, conventional explanations.
Right. And what kind of explanations are we talking about?
Well, there was one fairly early case investigated by CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies. An object was presented as a potential alien implant. Turned out, after analysis, it was just a common ball bearing. Apparently, it had been expelled naturally by the person.
A ball bearing. Okay, so a very mundane explanation in that instance.
It was. And what's kind of interesting, especially since around the mid-90s, is the sheer variety of objects that have been surgically recovered and labeled as implants.
Yeah, I noticed that in the research. It's not one consistent type of object, is it?
Not at all. We're talking glass shards, oddly shaped metal fragments, even carbon fibers, a real mix.
And the location, too. They're often found in places like hands, feet, legs, ears, not necessarily in the brain or, the nasal cavity where you might expect some kind of monitoring device to be placed.
Precisely. That's a point skeptics often raise. And physicians point out something quite important here, too.
Which is?
That foreign objects get into our bodies all the time, often completely unnoticed. Think about falling down as a kid, getting tiny splinters, maybe stepping on something sharp.
Sure, that happens.
And the body has this natural reaction. It tries to wall off the foreign object. It encapsulates it in a membrane, basically scar tissue.
Okay.
This process involves immune cells, macrophages, and these connective tissue cells called fibroblasts. They build this little capsule around the object. And that encapsulation can make a perfectly ordinary, accidentally embedded object look like it was somehow deliberately placed there. It mimics some of the features people describe with these alleged implants.
Ah, I see. So the body's own defense mechanism could unintentionally create something that looks suspicious, even if the object itself is just a random bit of debris.
It's a plausible biological explanation for some findings, yes. And it's quite telling that even Whitley Strieber, who's obviously a central figure in abduction literature.
Right, with his book Communion.
Exactly. He acknowledged that an implant removed from his own ear was identified simply as collagen.
Collagen, just normal body protein.
A normal body protein, yes. He himself actually urged some caution about automatically assuming these recovered objects were definitive proof of anything extraterrestrial. Joe Nickell, the skeptical investigator, often suggests these are just ordinary materials misidentified.
And Dr. Virgil Priscu also talks about this encapsulation process, right? How it can make embedded things seem deliberately placed.
Yes, he explains the physiology quite clearly. The macrophages, the fibroblasts, creating that scar tissue seal. It's a standard bodily response.
Okay. That brings us neatly, I think, to the psychological side of things, because these experiences are deeply felt by the people reporting them. What does research say about the individuals, the experiencers?
Well, studies comparing experiencers to control groups have found some interesting patterns. experiencers tend to report higher levels of dissociativity.
Dissociativity, meaning like feeling detached.
Yes, a sense of detachment from oneself or surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Also, higher levels of absorption. That's the tendency to get really deeply engrossed in imaginative or sensory experiences.
Okay.
They also tend to report more belief in and experiences with paranormal phenomena, higher self-reported psychic ability, and something called fantasy proneness.
Fantasy proneness. Let's talk about that. The FPP theory.
Right, the fantasy-prone personality theory. This suggests that some individuals have exceptionally vivid, immersive imaginations. So vivid, in fact, that they might sometimes struggle to distinguish between fantasy and reality.
And how does that connect to abduction claims?
Studies looking into the backgrounds of people reporting abductions have often found that a significant percentage show traits consistent with FPP.
So the idea is that these incredibly detailed, often bizarre abduction narratives could, for some people, stem from these very powerful internal imaginative experiences rather than an external event.
That's one psychological theory put forward, yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily cover all cases, but it's considered a potential contributing factor for some.
And there's also the connection to sleep phenomena, right?
Yes, there's another major area of research.
Oh, yeah.
Things like hypnagogic and hypnopompic states.
Those are the states just as you're falling asleep or waking up.
Exactly. During those transitions, you can have incredibly vivid, realistic hallucinations, auditory, visual, tactile. They can feel completely real.
I've heard about that. And sleep paralysis often goes along with it.
Very often, sleep paralysis is when you're conscious, awake, but temporarily unable to move. It can be absolutely terrifying. You might feel a presence in the room, pressure on your chest.
And historically, people attributed that feeling to demons or witches, didn't they? Like the old hag syndrome.
Precisely. Across cultures, you find folklore explaining sleep paralysis through supernatural entities. So the theory goes, in our current cultural context, influenced by sci-fi and UFO lore, that same terrifying experience paralysis, weird sensations, maybe hallucinations of figures, could be interpreted as an alien abduction.
So the feeling of being held down, seeing strange figures, it maps onto the abduction narrative that's now part of our culture. Studies have actually linked abduction reports to episodes of sleep paralysis, haven't they?
They have. It suggests a potential neurological basis, or at least a contributing factor, for some aspects of these reported experiences. The paralysis, the hallucinations. They are real physiological and perceptual events, but the interpretation might be shaped by belief and culture.
Now, you mentioned Dr. John Mack earlier, the Harvard psychiatrist. His perspective is interesting because he took these accounts very seriously, didn't he?
He did. Mack interviewed hundreds of alleged abductees. And while he was careful, he stopped short of saying definitively, yes, aliens are physically abducting people. He concluded something quite significant.
What was that?
He felt that standard psychiatric explanations like psychosis or simple delusion just weren't sufficient to explain the consistency, the detail, and especially the profound emotional impact and transformation these experiences had on people.
So he saw something genuinely powerful happening to these individuals, something that didn't fit neatly into existing psychiatric boxes, even if he didn't jump to an extraterrestrial conclusion.
That seems to be a fair summary of his position. He found the experiences compelling and worthy of serious study, suggesting they might represent something beyond our current understanding, perhaps interdimensional or spiritual, not necessarily just nuts and bolts aliens.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity. It's not just a simple either situation.
Not at all. And when we look at how these implant narratives are framed today, there's another interesting shift.
In what way?
Well, unlike older ideas, say magical charms or cursed objects from folklore, modern alien implant accounts usually describe them as pieces of technology, sophisticated devices.
Right, implying function, purpose, engineering.
Exactly. It reflects our technological age, doesn't it? We think in terms of tracking devices, communication relays, biological monitors.
That's a really good point. The nature of the implant mirrors our own technological capabilities and maybe our anxieties. You hear functions proposed like tracking, mind control, surveillance.
Precisely. These hypothetical functions often tap directly into very contemporary fears about government overreach, loss of privacy, being controlled by unseen forces or technologies.
So the implant could almost be acting as a sort of symbolic focus for these broader societal anxieties.
It's certainly a possible interpretation how these narratives might function psychologically and culturally.
Okay, let's shift back to the physical side. If someone does have an object removed that they believe is an implant, What are the challenges in actually investigating it scientifically?
Oh, the challenges are significant. First, just getting access to the alleged implants can be difficult.
Right, they're presumably quite rare finds.
Then there's the chain of custody issue. To be scientifically valid, you need to know exactly where the object has been, who handled it, from the moment it was removed to the moment it reaches the lab, to rule out contamination or switching. That's often very hard to establish reliably in these cases.
Makes sense. You need a clear, unbroken trail.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And then you need the right expertise, materials scientists, biologists, physicists, who can perform unbiased analysis. Finding labs willing and equipped to do this without prior assumptions can also be a hurdle.
Dr. Stuart Appel, a psychologist and UFO researcher, highlighted this gap, didn't he, between the claims and the actual verified scientific data?
Yes, he really emphasized the need for rigorous protocols, independent verification, things that are standard in other scientific fields but often lacking in these investigations. The gap between anecdote and hard data remains pretty wide.
So even if an object exists, proving what it is, especially proving it's extraterrestrial, is a very tall order scientifically.
A very tall order indeed. However, and this is important, regardless of whether the claims are objectively true or scientifically verified,
Yes.
we have to acknowledge the human element. There are thousands of people who genuinely, sincerely believe they have these implants.
And that belief has real consequences for them.
Absolutely. It
Okay.
shapes their lives. It can cause immense distress, fear, but also sometimes feelings of wonder, confusion, or even feeling chosen. Understanding that lived reality, the subjective experience, is crucial, separate from the question of physical proof.
That's a vital point. The impact is real, whatever the ultimate explanation.
Precisely. Now, if we were to think hypothetically, what would constitute definitive proof of extraterrestrial origin for one of these objects? What kind of evidence would meet that extraordinary standard?
That's the key question, isn't it? What's the benchmark?
Well, science has some pretty clear ideas about what would be needed. We could probably break it down into a few categories. First, material composition. If an alleged implant was made of materials demonstrably unknown on Earth, or maybe known elements, but with isotopic ratios completely different from anything found in our solar system, that would be huge.
So elements combine in ways not found naturally here, or having an atomic signature that points elsewhere.
Exactly. Unique elemental combinations or confirmed isotopic anomalies that can't be explained by terrestrial processes. That's strong evidence.
Okay, what else?
Second, functional impossibilities. Imagine finding an object that, say, generated energy in a way that violates known laws of physics, or performed computations beyond anything theoretically possible with known physics or materials.
Not just beyond our current tech, but beyond what physics says should be possible.
Yes, something operating outside our fundamental understanding of physical law. That would be extremely compelling evidence for a non-human, possibly non-terrestrial intelligence.
Wow. Okay, that's a high bar. Is there a third category?
Thirdly, manufacturing impossibilities. If analysis revealed structures at the nanoscale or even atomic scale that were clearly artificial, but created in ways that exceed not just our current manufacturing capabilities, but what we understand about how matter can even be arranged.
Like micro machines built atom by atom in a way we can't replicate or even fully comprehend?
Something like that.
Structures that defy known physical or chemical processes for their formation, yet are clearly fabricated. That would also be very powerful evidence.
So, unknown materials, impossible functions, or impossible manufacturing. Those seem like solid criteria for an extraordinary claim like this.
They represent the level of evidence science would generally require, yes.
So how do the actual reported cases stack up against these tough criteria? We mentioned the ball bearing and the collagen earlier.
Right, those clearly don't meet the criteria. Then you have the work of Dr. Roger Leir, the podiatrist. He claimed to have removed quite a few alleged implants.
And his findings were often presented as suggesting something unusual, weren't they? Yes. Some reports based on his work, like one from 2009, mentioned analysis suggesting materials beyond human fabrication, non-terrestrial components, even radio frequency transmissions being detected from an object after removal.
RF transmissions, that sounds like the functional impossibility category.
It leans that way, yes. However, and this is crucial, the specifics of those lab analyses, the exact nature of the claimed isotopic anomalies or material composition, they've been heavily debated and critiqued.
Critiqued how?
Questions were raised about the labs used, the methodologies, whether the results were independently replicated, and sometimes about Dr. Lear's own credentials and potential biases. The documentary Patient 17 highlighted his work, and one case with supposedly unusual elements.
But the scientific validation remained controversial.
It did. Rigorous, peer-reviewed confirmation was generally lacking, which is what's needed to move beyond intriguing claims.
And we also have anecdotal reports, like that Reddit user you mentioned.
Right. The person who described a white, round, flat object removed from their leg. An initial X-ray apparently suggested a benign calcium deposit.
Okay, a common medical finding.
But the user claimed a later lab analysis found unknown components. The problem is that alleged lab report wasn't provided publicly or for scientific review.
So it remains an unverified personal account. It really highlights that challenge you mentioned earlier, lack of access to verifiable data.
Exactly. These cases often generate risk, but they consistently struggle to provide that transparent, reproducible evidence needed for scientific acceptance. The findings might sound amazing, but without that robust backing, they remain inconclusive.
It seems like we keep circling back to that burden of proof idea.
We do. In science, the onus is always on the claimant to provide the evidence for an extraordinary claim. And the consensus among most scientists looking at this field is that, as compelling as some stories might be, that burden of proof for alien implants hasn't yet been met convincingly.
It's a fair assessment based on the available verifiable data.
It is. Now, related to belief formation, why might people come to believe they had these experiences, even without definitive proof? Cognitive biases likely play a role.
Ah, yes. The ways our brains can sometimes lead us astray. What biases might be relevant here?
Several could be involved. There's something called social compellingness, basically. Stories involving human-like characters and intentions are just easier for our brains to process and find believable than abstract data.
Okay, so a story about aliens doing things is more compelling than, say, a complex neurological explanation.
Potentially, yes. Then there's agenticity or anthropomorphism, our tendency to see intention and human-like agency, even in random events or non-human things. We might perceive intention behind unusual bodily sensations or recovered objects.
Seeing purpose where there might be none.
Right. Some have even speculated about infant nostalgia, the idea that the typical gray alien face, with large eyes and small features, might vaguely resemble how a newborn perceives a human face up close, creating a subconscious resonance.
That's an interesting, if speculative, idea. And confirmation bias, of course.
Always a big one. We tend to seek out and interpret information in a way that confirms what we already believe or want to believe. If someone suspects they've been abducted, they might interpret ambiguous memories or physical marks through that lens.
And negativity bias.
That suggests frightening or negative stories are often more memorable and seem more plausible than positive or neutral ones. Abduction narratives are often terrifying.
There's also the idea that the gray alien form could be a supernormal stimulus for intelligence. Its features exaggerating cues we associate with intellect, making it seem compellingly real.
That's another hypothesis. And fundamentally, these abduction narratives, especially those involving implants and control, can function a bit like conspiracy theories, often tapping into existing distrust of government or authority, but with a sci-fi twist.
That makes sense. Now, what about the role of hypnosis in all this? It's often used to recover abduction memories, right?
It is frequently used, yes, by researchers like Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack. The idea is to access memories that aren't available consciously.
But hypnosis is controversial in memory retrieval, isn't it?
Very much so. While it can be a therapeutic tool, it's also well documented that hypnosis can inadvertently create false memories. It's known to increase confidence in memories, whether they're true or false, and make people more susceptible to suggestion from the hypnotist.
So someone could develop detailed, vivid memories of an abduction under hypnosis, sincerely believe they are real, but they might actually be confabulations, constructed memories.
That is a recognized risk, known as false memory syndrome. The memories feel completely real to the person, but they don't correspond to actual events. Factors we discussed earlier, like fantasy proneness and dissociative tendencies, might also make someone more susceptible to developing false memories, even outside of hypnosis. And sleep paralysis experiences could easily be elaborated into fuller narratives.
It's important to note, though, isn't it, that research generally suggests people reporting these experiences don't typically have diagnosable psychological disorders, like schizophrenia.
That's correct. Generally, studies find that experiencers, while showing those traits like higher absorption or fantasy proneness, don't usually meet criteria for major psychiatric illnesses. Their experiences are unusual, but they aren't typically explained by conditions like psychosis.
So it's more about personality traits and cognitive styles, potentially, than mental illness per se. Are there other alternative interpretations?
Some researchers look at neurological factors. For instance, unusual activity in the temporal lobes of the brain has been linked to strange sensory experiences, mystical feelings, and memory anomalies. Some propose this could be connected to the anomalous memories reported in some abduction claims.
So maybe localized brain activity could generate sensations or memory fragments that feel like an external event.
It's another avenue of investigation, trying to find biological correlates for these highly unusual subjective experiences.
It really underscores how complex this is, with potential contributions from psychology, neurology, culture, and the interpretation of ambiguous physical evidence.
Absolutely. There isn't one simple answer that covers everything.
Which brings us back, I suppose, to the central issue, the burden of proof. As we've discussed, the scientific standard for extraordinary claims requires extraordinary evidence.
And in the realm of alien implants, that definitive, verifiable, extraordinary proof remains elusive. The advocates bear the responsibility of providing it, and from a skeptical scientific standpoint, that burden hasn't been met.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, the hypothesis of government concealment of alien implant phenomena is, well, it's a powerful narrative. It touches on deep questions about reality, science, belief, and trust.
It really does. We have numerous accounts, alleged physical objects, and undeniably compelling personal stories. People are genuinely impacted by these experiences and beliefs.
But rigorous scientific verification of an extraterrestrial origin for these implants is still missing.
That's the current state of play.
Yeah.
Conventional explanations, misidentified objects, the body's natural responses, along with psychological factors like fantasy proneness, sleep phenomena, cognitive biases, and the potential for false memories offer alternative frameworks.
They provide ways to understand these experiences without invoking extraterrestrials, though perhaps not fully explaining every aspect to everyone's satisfaction, like Dr. Mack pointed out.
Exactly. The standard remains high. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And for alien implants, that definitive proof is still very much a subject of intense debate, ongoing investigation, and for many, deeply held belief.
It certainly gives you a lot to think about regarding evidence, belief, and how we interpret the unknown. Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.